Welcome to the Peopling Podcast, where we hang out with brilliant human beings who teach us how to be better, well, humans, and decode what makes us tick and click. Inspired by the book Peopling, available on Amazon. Let's get this episode started. Hey friends, thanks for joining us for another episode of our Peopling podcast. My name is Kristi. I'm your host, and it's so great to be with you again this week. I have a very, very special VIP guest today, and I cannot wait to introduce you to Edith Tiencken. She is the founder and CEO of Smart Brain Insights, also known as SBI Incorporated, and regional partner of Neurolink Company. And she is recognized as a trailblazer. Edith is on a mission to help individuals and organizations achieve growth not yet imagined. As passionate advocate for neuro agility, Edith blends cutting-edge neuroscience with actionable strategies, empowering professionals to unlock peak performance and ignite innovation and thrive in the age of intelligence and disruption. Her distinguished career spans executive leadership roles, organizational development consulting, and international business development with a footprint that includes the U.S., 5 continents. How's that? Latin America, Canada, Europe, Asia Pacific. Edith is a distinguished Toastmaster who has inspired thousands of professionals worldwide for over 3 decades. Her extensive certifications include Global Professional in Human Resources, Senior Certified Professional, Master Neuro Coach, Strategy Facilitator, and AI for Talent Development, along with a lot of other accolades. Edith's academic foundation includes postgraduate studies in organizational psychology, business administration, leadership, and process consulting from GE Management School. Edith, it is such an absolute honor to get some time with you to get to unpack that beautiful brain of yours. But would you please do us the honor to get to know you as the person? Tell us a little bit about you, where you came from, what it was like being you growing up in this world, and then we're going to talk about all the things you know now.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for the invitation, Kristi. We have been having this on the work for a long time, and I'm just happy to be here with you. Let me tell you about myself. Where do we start? I will start by now, people know that English is not my first language. I was born in New York from a Puerto Rican parents, and my identity, although Puerto Rican, I am considered a BB, bilingual, bicultural person. That's a new term for many of us. But the idea here is that I was born in one place, grew up in another, and then came back to the United States. I'm being blessed with a beautiful career. But let me start by saying I was not necessarily working from the beginning in what I wanted, which is highly connected with what I do today. I love working with the brain, people's brains, that is. Sometimes it's better working with a brain than with the whole person, but that's another conversation. The idea here is that my safe haven, being a child from separated parents, was school. Learning was my passion. May I add, it still is my passion. And it's what led me to move from one position to another, from one stage to another, and to create imagine that flexibility that you get when you can evolve with everything you're learning. And of course, those things that you are passionate about, like reading. So I wanted to be a writer. I wanted to be maybe a journalist that travels around the world. Well, the part about traveling the world, obviously, in my introduction, you already know I accomplished, but not as a journalist. When I graduated from high school, my father said, okay, so you're going to college? Of course, I'm going to college, Dad. In those days, parents had to sign your paperwork for school. And he says, okay, so you have 3 options. Well, wait a minute. That's not what I wanted. I want to be a journalist. So I want to be a famous writer. And my father said, writers, they will die of starvation. You got to make a living. And I said, okay, so what are my options? You have 3 options. You can be a secretary. That's the administration assistants these days. Back on the days, we call it secretaries. I can be a teacher, or I can be an accountant. Okay. Meanwhile, of course, my brothers can be engineers and other things. But that's, again, another conversation. And I decided, okay, accounting it is, because it sounds like I can make a little bit more money there, right? So I went to college for accounting. And with that decision, I also made a second decision. This is the last time somebody will make a decision for me. From now on, I'm in charge. With that decision, I left home. And in that summer, I found myself living in an apartment with my auntie, closer to the college I was going to study. But the truth is that I didn't realize that that meant no money for housing, no money for tuition, and you got to make more work. And I was already working as a secretary, but that was a little part time when I was in school. And my dad just cut me off completely. And I found myself having to reinvent myself. How I'm going to have 3 part times so I can pay college, so I can pay my living, so I can do whatever that was. But I decided that whatever I do, I will do it very well. So I started studying, and in a year, my professor, he was a banker, and I was already doing my accounting courses, and I became a tutor in accounting right away. So I was pretty good on math too, and the business kind of things. And he says, Edith, they're looking for a teller in my bank. Would you like to apply? And I said, absolutely. I applied for that job, and I went to study then at night, but now I can have a job, and I rented a whole house, and then I have roommates that pay for the whole tuition. That was kind of my second or third business, because as a child I had other businesses I will tell you later. But the idea here was that it was my first moment that I said, this works for me. Now I have a full-time job. 6 months later, I was promoted. Then one of my bosses moved to another bank. They booked me out. I moved to another bank. By the age of 23, 22 and a half, pretty much, I was already VP of operations in a bank. And I realized I had no other place to go. Kristi, that was the moment that I looked around and everybody had white hair but me. Well, and some of the guys had no hair, but that's a different story altogether. And I said, oh my God, what am I going to do? Now I'm reporting to the guy that is kind of below to the president of the bank. What am I going to do now? And I remember that there was this company that had called me for another job. I didn't know in the days that was called headhunting. And I decided to go there, and I quit my job. Yes, without another job. Would I do that again? Maybe I would do it differently right now. But do I regret that decision? The answer is no. Absolutely not. Did I suffer? Yes. Did it pay off? Yes, too. There's many yeses sometimes in those regrets. And I remember being in a presentation and somebody says, there's a lot of power on regrets if you know how to use it properly. So I had no regrets, but again, a lot of lessons learned. But I went to this so-called headhunter, and I sat down with the owner of the place. He interviews me and says, so what are you looking for? And I said, I really don't know what I'm looking for. Remember, I wanted to be a journalist, and I ended up being a banker. And the one thing I know is that I learn fast. The one thing I know is that I'm capable of doing many things. My decision is I don't want to get paid for a salary. I want to get paid for my productivity. Kristi, I had no idea. That was called commissions. The second part I did not know, my beautiful young ignorance, is that you don't get commissions until you sell. Guess what happened? Did I have money in the bank? Have I been saving? Yes, I was a banker. I knew about finances. But 6 months without a job and no salaries really was eating my few savings at that time. And there was this moment that I thought, did I make the right decision? Did I make a mistake? But I was enjoying and I was learning so much about the different positions, new companies, ways of working. I never been in factories in different types of business, pharmacies, electronics. That was the days that Puerto Rico was flooded with pharmaceutical companies. And after that, then the manufacturing companies of, Hewlett Packard, Digital, all those big names of the days. And I said, no, I'm liking this. I'm liking this. 6 months later, I bought that company, which is the business I still have today. And that's a beautiful success story. I'm 42 years later now. I was 23 when I bought that company. And throughout these years, I had put the company in the back burner because the client has said, hey, we really want to work with you. I love that dance between corporate America and having the big names behind you and having that sense of the team in a corporation. But I also enjoy going back to business and bringing the knowledge. Every experience brings something back to my business. Sometimes I had delegated the business to be managed by someone else, But at the same time, one of the things that I would have never, ever, ever regret was dancing that between what is working in a corporation and what is working on my business. And that's probably the most beautiful dance that I learned to dance for many years. For the last 6 years, I decided that's it because I already passed the 6-0 and it's different now. I'm in the legacy stage. So now my job is about not only helping companies to grow to spaces they never imagined they can grow, but I also do that with people, with coaches, with people who are developing others. And my passion for developing people really was born in General Electric, and I had the chance to work with GE back on the days of Jack Welch. And those who study business, they know that Jack Welch was the guy that brought HR to the strategic table. And that was my first job. But that's probably a little bit much to say. But at the end of the day, learning and development is my passion, is what I ended up doing. And as to what I wanted to be a writer, well, I started writing after my trauma because I had to do some therapy for that trauma, right? But after that trauma, and I don't call it a trauma, really. I was destined for something different than I thought. But I'm writing stories. And one day, I would not like to say one day either. I would like to say they are getting ready to be published. They are ready to be shared. Part of my job today is when I'm in stages as a public speaker and when people draw from my experience, there's so many stories that I can tell, so many that I can count. Being the second, as in a second career now is also giving me an opportunity to be in more stages and making sure that I can accomplish helping others probably have a shortened way to get to where they want and not having to have it a long way the way I had to do it. But it's definitely an opportunity to give back to the world all the blessings that I have received.
Goodness, Edith, this is extraordinary. You're extraordinary. So here's what I love about you. First off, saying this is the last time somebody tells me what I'm going to do with my life and my decisions. I love that about you because that is who you are. You are a resilient and strong human being, and it's one of the things that I just love most about you. But
Thank you.
you started off dreaming and scheming this one direction, and then life has this funny way. Sometimes people just fall into it, but it was almost like it was drawing you into it through these different opportunities. And I love the journey. And now that we know a little bit about your past, I'm so excited to start to extract from that beautiful big brain of yours, because you are an education junkie, but you do stuff with it. And one of the first opportunities that I had gotten to know you, I was sitting in this workshop and you were presenting to a room full of leaders. And we got to go through that neuro agility, and the results were mind blowing. When I got to read this report, I learned more about myself in this amount of time from what you put together than a lot of really bad experiences, 100 failures, 20 successes. You know what I mean? Like all of a sudden I got to understand, like I understand that there's personality tests and there's disc assessments and those kinds of things, but this is on a whole other level. So for the people who get fascinated with brain work, will you start telling us, first of all, what drew you to this chapter in your life, this part of the education, and share with us, what's fascinating to you about it, and how does that affect us in our connections, our communication, and how we show up in the world? Like, just run with it. I can't wait to hear and learn from you.
Fantastic, Kristi. That's great. As a it's a well packed kind of question. The first part, what drew me to neuroscience, and the second part, how that neuroscience shapes our world. And then you say something important. Where the study began between us, we knew each other from before, but I'm glad to hear that that assessment at that moment really helped you so much. So I'm going to start there for a moment so people can understand what I'm going to say second. Normally, a lot of people take a lot of assessments, right? And as an HR person back on the days, from DISC to PXTs to the calipers to the Hoggans to the so many great tools out there, so many ways for us to unpack our personality a little bit. This is what happens. Sometimes people love this type of assessments because they looked at it, but it's almost like the horoscope, right? Something always fits me. No matter what, I can be all 12 signs sometimes when I read the horoscope. I can read this one and that matches me too. But the idea with those personality assessment is that they're very, very, very cool because when you look at it, you think about an iceberg, right? What you see here in personality assessment is what other people see. So we're always agreeing. Of course, I agree that I am a little bit more extrovert, that I am more alive. I might agree that I'm hard-headed. I might agree on things that people say. And then you go to the psychometric tools, a little bit deeper. That's not what everybody see, but it might show some of those traits that people see in our behaviors and things like that. But when you go to neuroscience, now you're going to my biology. Now you're going into getting to know how your brain process information. Now that's a different story because before we can even show a trait of personality, something is happening in my brain and processing information. I'm behaving, a group of behaviors shows personality. So it's almost like you're going in a process of going down the engineering part, you know? So first, before any personality is going to be your information processing. So you're going at the deepest level that you can go when you are looking as to understanding someone and especially understanding ourselves.
Before we dive any deeper into this conversation, I want to take a quick moment to share a tool that has significantly improved my life, and that's called Growth Day. It's like having world-class mentors right in your pocket. There are daily challenges that help grow your confidence, your inspiration, and your drive. Check out the show notes for your link to a free trial, and don't let another moment pass you by without checking out Growth Day.
Sometimes when we talk about emotional intelligence, I like to call it different, but when we talk about emotional intelligence, we know that it has two main components. The component of interpersonal, how much I know about myself, that self-awareness, etc. And then you have the social awareness component, right? The interpersonal part. My argument with this is how can you consider yourself highly emotional intelligent if in your self-awareness you don't know how you process your information? And that leads me to now the story of how I got into neuroscience. I was in the assessment industry already. I was international manager with one of my employers. And somebody came to me and says, you know, Edith, I met this individual. He's from South Africa. He has an outstanding assessment. At the time, it was called Learning Receptiveness Profile. And Andre is looking for a partner, then maybe the company you're working with might be interested because they need someone who can distribute this assessment in United States, Latin America, etc. This is almost 16 years ago of this event. And I said, oh, fantastic, make the introduction. He did the introduction. And what is the first thing we normally do? Test drive. Test drive. Give me the assessment so I can see if I can represent this. Well enough, I take the assessment. Now I'm going to tell you a parenthesis. There was this situation I was facing that nobody knew about it. You know how you can always keep secrets, especially if there's self-doubt or something we don't want the world to see. Mine was that I was teaching emotional intelligence back on the days as part of my leadership trainings and development. But Kristi, I did suffer sometimes emotional hijacks. I just knew how to handle it very well, but it was going inside, right? I would just take my breaks, I do the pause, all those things. But that doesn't mean that I could not control it. It will happen. And I never told anybody about that. But here I do the assessment. And Andre is doing the debriefing. You must remember this. If he's watching this, he's going to laugh. He said, so Edith, it probably happens to you that when there is a lot of noises or people interrupt you or you're trying to make a point across, if you are in the level of stress in the conversation, it's very possible that you get upset to the point that you feel like you're out of control or that you're losing it. And I was like, not possible. That was my best kept secret. You remember the days on Skype?
Yes.
Yes, remember that?
Yeah.
Okay, I was working with lots of clients in Latin America on Skype back on the days. People talk about Zoom and complain Zoom. Get them Skype on the days. And normally in some of those countries, they have a great weather. So they open the windows and you can hear the traffic, and people didn't have the discipline of headphones or noise cancellation, or forget about that technology. I'm talking back then. And I had this client who's one. There's always one, right? There's always one. And every time that we're negotiating and things would get stressed, her voice was very, very pitchy, and the noise and the background. And then she got a lot faster when she was stressed out. And here I am, and my heart is going boom, 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 boom. My throat is like getting close, and I'm like, I'm going to cure her. I'm going to cure her. And no, I cannot kill clients because then I'll die from starvation. But the truth is that I was going nuts. And I said, how do you know that happened? And he says, because our brain, this brain, communicates with our senses crosswords. That means when I was left ear dominant and I started processing information with my left hemisphere. So this ear communicates with this first, with the right. And at that time, I started processing with the left. Well, guess what? I was already in a little bit of a stress by default, and I was not aware of that. But worse than that, the left ear likes the sound, the how people say things. Meanwhile, the left hemisphere was looking for what is being said, what is the content, what is the meaning of it. And I'm like, because stress generates cortisol. Now the neurons are not connecting. And because they're not connecting properly, the information is not flowing. So you get what they call like a switch off. It's not necessarily switches completely, but it's almost like a dimmer. Now the communication is not flowing and your stress keeps getting elevated, and that caused the emotional hijack. So my issue was completely biological. And it was fascinating to me. And I said, this is the future of people development. If people were to understand these kind of things, you know how many divorces we can prevent, how many employees we can save, how many bosses can understand better their people, and so on. So at the end of the day, for me was like, this is the future. At that moment, I tried to sell this idea to my company. They say, no, 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 no. But a year later, because we tried, we did experiments and things. And like, well, they're more on the personality and psychometric tools, and strategically speaking, one didn't speak to the other. So we decided, okay, it's not a good fit for this company, but it was a good fit for me. And I said, Andre, I'll buy the license. So at that moment, I invested with Andre and became the partner for all Latin America. So I got all the license for Neurolink in Latin America. Little later, I helped with the strategy, and today it's called Neuroagility Profile. And neuroagility is this idea that we can process information with ease, speed, and flexibility. So let me tell you the second part of the story. Andre started coaching me, obviously, so I can overcome that. And I moved from leading with my left to leading with my right. I started design thinking, I started training, I started doing a lot of cross-lateral movement and developing the agility of the brain. And today, I don't get emotionally hijacked because you have a pitchy voice or because you interrupt me. I might tell you, hey, can you give me a break so I can talk? But just because it's my personality, not because I'm an emotional hijack. And when you start thinking, sometimes people in communication, they might focus a little bit onto what is being said. Others focus on how. You ever had that moment where people say, well, it's not what they say, it's how they say it. Left ear dominance most of the times, right? But most of us, we don't even know what is our dominant ear, what is our dominant eye. How do we lead when we're doing information processing? We have very little tolerance. If we're frontals, if people take a little bit of time in answering, we're like, okay, can I push you on the back so you can come out with the words? And you're like, but if we learn all these things, we will have more tolerance in the world. So, and we have more potential to develop. So my job right now is I'm fascinated to how I can help people succeed because they become more agile, in the information processing pieces.
It is so extraordinary. I remember the aha moments I had going through this because I'm left dominant. And when I learned that, I went running back to my husband because I'm over here going, now I know why. I call him tone deaf, and I'm sorry that sounds very mean, but he doesn't hear his own tone, and I happen to be highly sensitive to it. And so we constantly have this like pause, tell me what you meant, because I know that that's not what you meant. He's like, no, I just simply said, and I'm like, no, you didn't simply say, you said it this way. And he's like, say it that way. I'm like, you
Yes.
totally did. So what I hear and what he thinks he said are two completely different things.
Oh, yeah.
And I just thought like this was the way our relationship is going to be, right?
Okay.
Yeah, but think about parents with their kids. If they understood the what dominant eye, what dominant ear, those kinds of things, and then how our brain processes, like
Mhm.
all of a sudden you're removing all of the obstacles or all of the unknowns that create anxiety and frustrations and eventually lead to a breakdown in communication, fights, shutting down, just being
Absolutely.
dismissive, hostile, whatever.
Mhm.
All of those different kinds of usually negative emotions that are attached to it. The solution's right here with this incredible skill set that
Yes.
you teach it to coaches, so people can't come directly to you for this. So you teach it to coaches so that they can teach it to their clients. Is that
Yes, we certify people too. But let me expand a little bit on the tool as well, Kristi, because the understanding their design is one thing. The work we do have two major components on the framework. The dimension of how are you wired, especially how do you process the information, what are your sensors. But then the second component, which is the one that allow us to really use the potential of our brain, is how do you treat your brain in terms of how do you sleep? How do you eat? How do you manage stress? Your mindset, things that really are what we call optimizers of the brain. I'll give you a perfect example. I know for your profile that you have this beautiful balance left and right. And definitely we have an opportunity to say, okay, here is when people are balanced between left and right, they not only are very analytical, they can be highly creative, right? So at that, those are like, wow. But sometimes you can have that Cadillac. Let's say I like Porsches. So let's say you have the Porsche for the brain. You're balanced between the right and the left, the frontal and the back, and you got that beautiful, beautiful balance. That you're not too extreme because the streams typically are more rigid. For example, if I'm extremely left, I might bring rigidity. I might like and uncomfortable to do things certain ways and only that way. But when you're balanced, you're more comfortable with change. You're more comfortable with making sure that might not be the approach, but it might be this other approach. You flex, right? The opposite is also true. If you're extremely right, then you might have trouble with math, analyticals, structure, disciplines, things that require a level of logic and one step at a time. And on the other hand, the frontal and back. If I'm extremely frontal, you hear people that even when they go to the bathroom, they tell you, I'm going to the bathroom because I haven't gone in the whole day. Is that okay? I'm taking 10 minutes. You're like, Jesus Christ, just stand up and go to the bathroom. I don't need the whole thing, right? I laugh about that because it's the most interesting example I can give you. But on the opposite is also true. You have people that are so back-brained, they're so quiet, and that sometimes you don't even notice their presence because they might not even say anything unless there's something highly important to be said or very meaningful to them. They're highly intentional. And even with that, they'll take their time to say it. So we have
and
all that beautiful diversity in the human beings. And the idea is what happened? What am I missing when I one extreme or the other extreme, when I don't have that ability to flex? And in today's world, actually, Kristi, I should mention to the audience the McKinsey, which is one of the largest researchers companies in the world and consulting too. And the World Economic Forum, they came up with a new research that just was released in January this year, January 2026. And it's talking for the first time as to how companies needs to develop what they call brain capital, new term. In the past, we used to talk about talent development, talent management, human resources, capital management, all of this. And now we're talking brain capital. And basically, it's the stool of three legs in the framework. One is the brain health, meaning the absence or the proper sort of treatment of whatever is mental illness, right? Or prevention. I would like to say prevention is a better word there. Then the brain wellness itself, how I'm treating my brain, like the optimizers and things like that. And the third is the brain skills. Because in the time of artificial intelligence, really, artificial intelligence is not going anywhere. We know that. It's here to stay. So the question is, this debate that I hear, which for me is a useless debate about how they're taking the jobs of the people, etc., is like, I like to see a world of human with artificial intelligence, because that's going to be our truth. But how I can be a good user of that is how I'm going to be using artificial intelligence in an intelligent way, which in the way that I can own it. And for that, we need to keep training our brains. But most people, unfortunately, is doing the opposite. They're using artificial intelligence to replace their thinking instead of thinking on how to use it. So that's another paradigm. But the idea here is that companies are speaking about that. The skills of the future that the World Economic Forum normally shows every year on the research is showing that more than 80%, for the last 10 years, more than 80% of those skills are human factors, are human skills, cognitive skills. And of course, we had to be up to date with technology and the use of artificial intelligence and all that, because this is the future. We are living the future already. The people talk about, in the future, no, the future is right now, right here. It's not 10 years from now. How do we train our brains is going to be very important. But I also want to talk about how do we coach people to have a better life? Because as much as we want to achieve in our careers and we want companies and we want to do more with less, at the same time, we're having an increased amount of anxieties. We have an increased amount of neurodivergent people in the workplace. And we're not understanding that information processing, understanding that is the answer to have tolerance, to have resilience, to make sure that we adapt and cope and actually able to collaborate with all sorts of information processing diversity out there. Because for me, a person with attention deficit is not a person with a problem. It's a person with a way of processing information different than the way I do it. And that's the reality. But we want to still seeing things like illnesses instead of diversity. So I'm just want to propose that there is so many things that coaches can be addressing today and helping people given the tools, the brain tools to work with whatever there is out there in their challenges, whether it's communication, whether it's organization, procrastination, because we see it a lot of, sometimes I open Facebook, very seldom, because I'm not a big social media person, but not because I don't like it, just because sometimes I run out of time on the day for doing it. And I don't have the discipline. I'm not going to give it myself any excuses. I don't have that discipline to go like my fiance does. He's always on social media. He's always monitoring what's going on. And sometimes I envy that. And sometimes I don't, because I tend to be highly present in everything I do. And how do we help people be there, be present, and making sure that we're maximizing opportunities? The most common question that I receive when I get interviewed is, Edith, if you can teach one skill to people in the world, what would that be? That's a very common question. And after 42 years leading, developing, coaching, training coaches, certifying people in neuroscience, in coaching skills, and all of that, I would like to say that probably is helping them how to learn. But by that, I mean sometimes the skill sets behind it. How do you stay present? How do you learn to listen and ask questions? Those two skills together, when they come together and develop that curiosity from the heart, that really want to learn about each other and what's going on in the world, is just probably the most powerful thing, because it's what is helping you to evolve, to grow, to actually enhance your business. It's just is is that thing that my slogan say, and it came from the heart. My slogan in my business, growth not yet imagined, is has helped me and helped many other of my clients to achieve levels that they never thought that they can achieve. And I would like to see more coaches, more people in development helping others do that thing that I know is possible doing.
Love that. I want to ask you, and I didn't ask you to do this in advance, so I'm asking you to tell me something off the fly. Is there a particular story, somebody you coached? I know that you coach CEOs and leaders, and then you also certify those coaches. Is there one story in particular that really stands out to you? Because I know your heart is to impact and influence other people, help them achieve their greatness. Is there one thing that just blew your mind or you're just like, "I'm gonna take this to my grave, like, I will forever remember this moment," that
Mm,
integrated what you taught or what you shared or their aha moment, and who knows what kind of effect it's having in the world today? Is there one story that stands out you can share with us?
absolutely. And I'm going to pick someone who's very dear to my heart today because her story was so transformational that she ended up getting certified and working for us and with
Love that.
us. Her name is Liliana, and she knows who she is. And Liliana and I, we go back. She was my client when I was doing organizational development projects. When we finished her project, she decided to go on consulting. That's how much she learned in the organizational development. But she's also an entrepreneur at heart, super intelligent professional. And Liliana was one of the early professionals who certified with us. But she really didn't act it on it immediately. She started doing other things and she put that a little bit on the back burner. One day she said, Edith, let's do some design thinking. I train on design thinking facilitation as well. And she says, why don't we do a design thinking for professionals here in this country where she's at? And I said, fantastic, let's do that. And I remember her rigidity at that moment coming across, just with very structured, very detailed, and almost with a perfection syndrome. What we people call perfection syndrome. I don't use those type of terms because I don't like labels, but that's what other people might call it. And I said, you need to learn how to flow. Now, for me, fluidity is something I learned when I learned how to manage my brain across those quadrants that I was explaining earlier in the conversation. And she quite didn't understand that. But then COVID hit, and she's a very successful entrepreneur. But for the first time, she found herself at home with the kids that the lady who takes care of the kids was not able to be there. Now she has to teach them. She cannot travel. Her husband is a doctor, so he was hardly at home. He was mostly at the hospital. And there was that need to reinvent herself. And she realized that her only way out was to flex. And little by little, she ended up studying more about the neuroscience, finishing her studies, finishing her certification. She started writing, she started realizing, she started reflecting, and then putting the work that we had taught her into action. Because as we know, you can go and learn a lot of things, but if you don't execute, nothing is going to happen ever. One day I'm listening to her doing a presentation, and she says, we had to live in the flow of life. And that was the moment. Today, she helps hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of women professionals, of leaders in different companies. And her business is thriving, helping other people do that thing that she did with neuroscience. It shifted her life. She looks younger. She looks full of power, so energetic. And she says, this really, Edith, absolutely changed my life. So, when you embrace the concept of neuroagility, where you can manage your information, your quality of life, that you can sleep well, that you can get up well, that you don't experience those anxieties anymore, that you can flow with the things because you are training your brain to face whatever that is coming your way. It's not necessarily that you don't feel challenges, is that you feel equipped and you're actually looking for that learning. That little bit of a challenge is actually something that inspires you to keep going, right? To have that motivation to get one more and then feel good about how you resulted on that. Even when it's upsetting moments, we're always looking at, okay, so what do we learn from here? And it's fantastic. She's a great partner today. And I tell you, is there's one case that I know it was my assignment is her. But like that, I have so many stories that I can tell you, Kristi, from CEOs who they were not in touch. The most common denominator I find on CEOs is this empathy, not the lack of empathy. It's almost like they don't even grasp the concept of empathy sometimes. Other times, they don't allow themselves to be vulnerable. And when we look at the work of Brené Brown, we know that to build trust, being vulnerable and being able to be your authentic self, I have no shame on that. It's so important. There we have a lot of CEOs, a lot of executives living with this alter ego that is on the way of their true self and their authenticity. However, Some people carry the badge that I'm authentic. It's an obvious opportunity for many of us to keep doing the work we're doing. Every time I meet a coach, I honor the work they do, whether they're coaching on finance, whether they're coaching on life coaching, whether they're coaching, whatever they coach. I have coaches on all walks of life, from marketing coaching all the way to executive coaches. I even have yoga coaches. And the one thing that I learned from the people who get in our programs and the people we had worked with in our program is how transformational this work is. And don't take me wrong, it requires work because it requires you knowing yourself and then applying that is that you discover that can take you to that next opportunity where you can be really neuro agile and then maintain it. Because again, if you stop doing what you need to be doing, then you go back to, that's the thing with the brain. Plasticity is a beautiful thing. I want to show you something. And this I learned from Lily. So she likes to think about the brain like something that with the plasticity allows you to expand and grow new neurons when those things that you learn. But the thing is that if you don't maintain the work, then that goes back to its original form, right? So, but the idea here is that there is a lot of opportunities for us to really diminish our level of stress, to treat ourselves better too. And with that comes improving communication because when you feel better, you treat others better. Sometimes we don't have leaders who are angry. We have leaders that haven't eat well, haven't sleep well, high levels of stress, etc. Another common question people ask me, where do I start? Where is it that a person will start treating the brain better? And yes, you need your food, you need your sleep. If I ask you, if you ask me, where do I start? I'll say you start by sleeping well. And that's the number one offender that people have. Most people don't sleep well. I will tell you that out of every 10 people that I see in my walks, at least 8 don't sleep properly. And when you don't sleep well, you don't detox your brain, you don't wake up with clarity, your cortisol levels start going up, you start getting weight, you get brain fogs, you get all of that. But once you have clarity, then you will make better decisions. Then you will eat better because you're making better decisions. You will make it to the gym because you're making better decisions too. So your clarity of mind is going to be there and helping your brain help you, in other words.
Extraordinary advice. I love that. Thank you for sharing some frequently asked questions because
Yes.
that's awesome. That's so wonderful. So as we wrap up our time together, I'm very excited to ask you this last question. Part of the Peopling book, we have the Be the Change Challenge. And so I want to ask you, Edith, if you could share with us one actionable thing that we can do or put into our sphere today that we can do this week so we can be the change in our own community or in our own relationships.
Interesting. I have so many answers for that, but I'm going to pick the one that I see is so much needed. Slow down. I will tell you why. If you slow down, your urgency is going to decrease a little bit. The worst enemy of empathy, the worst enemy of stress is that sense of urgency that sometimes we auto create because not everything is urgent. Urgent is you have to be in an emergency room. That's urgent, right?
Yes.
But when we want to treat people with kindness, you got to slow down because think about it. If you're going too fast, not always you say good morning. I'm been victim of that myself. Not always you stop to be kind or to listen because you are going so fast. Some people are going so fast, they don't even know where they're going, but they're going really, really, really fast. And the idea here is that we practice slowing down and being more present in everything we do, not forgetting that the human being that is in front of you is the most important thing every single time. And sometimes we give priorities to so many things. I like people's brain because I love humans. I believe in the greatness of people. Everybody has a brain and it's beautiful. If we only get curious enough to learn how they process that, how is it that, what makes you Kristi? What makes you the beautiful human being that you are? What is the greatness in you that I can discover? But if we don't slow down, we don't ask those questions. So that's my thing.
Extraordinary advice. Thank you, my friend. Edith Tiencken, thank you so much for everything that you've shared with us today. Thank you for who you are in this world.
Thank
I've
you.
got your contact information in the show notes, and I know people are going to be wanting to connect with you, learn more from you, follow you. And
Thank
I
you.
know that you've got a couple of projects in the works. So I'm excited to start seeing that unfold this year. And I'm excited about some big things happening on your journey that I'm a little privy to. So I'm
Yes.
excited for seeing that. And now this audience is now introduced to you and they get to see that unfold and learn from you too. So thank you for what you've shared with us. Thank you for coaching and teaching the coaches and leaders and the CEOs out there, because everything starts from leadership and trickles down, doesn't it?
Yes.
From our culture to how it's modeled, and it uses an example of how to treat others. So the fact that you're pouring into the leaders, then they can pour into the people that they lead. So it's extraordinary.
Yes.
Appreciate your
Especially
time.
at home. Yes.
Yes, yes,
And Kristi, I cannot live without saying this. If you ask me for the second thing that I would like invite you to do,
yes.
don't forget that you're responsible for the little ones' for brain formation. Every word that we say has an impact on those brains. And our kids, our children are learning from you. So help them have great brains so they can be great people when they grow up.
That is I want to pause on that for just a second, because almost every single interview that I've done for this podcast, it always goes back to childhood. And if you really got deep in conversation with people, it always goes back to childhood. Like we're these young little babies inside of this aging body, right? That's just taking
I
on
lost
bigger
connection.
challenges. When it's
I
all
think I
said and
lost
done.
connection.
No, we're here. We're here. We still have it. Edith, we're still together. I can hear you. I'll just do this. Thank you so much for being here with us. And until next
Well,
time.
Kristi, I lost connection.